You're listening to This is Yoga Therapy. I'm your host, Michelle Lawrence, and I've had the opportunity to interview many of those who are making a difference at the intersections of yoga and health. And I'm here to share with you their stories and conversations. Thanks for listening. In today's episode, I spoke with Natalie Buster. Natalie's a yoga therapist. She's an end-of-life navigator, a certified death doula, a grief reliever, an actor, a podcaster, a writer, and a mentor with a deep desire to help people. She's the resident yoga therapist at Abode, which is a contemplative home for the dying in San Antonio, Texas. Earlier this year at Abode, she launched an end-of-life yoga training program, and she also helps lead the death doula training program there, which incorporates contemplative practices. We spoke about her work as well as what brought her to yoga and end-of-life care on the podcast today. And it's so great to reconnect with you today, Natalie.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I have been listening to this podcast since I started learning under you, and I'm just thrilled to be a guest today.
So I would love if we just started with a little bit of your background, even if you could share more about your acting career, as well as what brought you to yoga initially.
Sure. So I am currently on the national tour of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And I'm playing Grandma.
Coming to a city near you, maybe?
Maybe. We're all over kind of the Bible Belt area and some of the East Coast.
Cool.
Yeah. But I've been acting since I was 9 years old. I was cast in the musical Annie with our local community theater. And so theater's been a really important part of my life. I moved to New York City after I graduated from college, and I really needed something that could help me stay sane in the city that never sleeps. I had found other ways to self-soothe my nervous system, and they weren't really working anymore. So a friend of mine who is a rockette tuned me into yoga. And so I took my first yoga class in New York City, and I fell in love. And
where was that? Do you remember? I used to practice in New York as well.
Yeah, I actually started with Bikram yoga, and I did a lot at the Flatiron studio. And so that was really exciting to be able to have these beautiful views of New York City while I was sweating and working. But what it really helped me do, Michelle, is it helped me find my center again. I had a little bit of an alcohol problem, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I think people need to talk about that more so that others know they're not alone. But yoga really helped me with my sobriety. So that was the first gift that yoga gave to me. I did a 60-day challenge at the same time that I decided to stop drinking. And it really helped. It helped me find who I was. It helped me realign my priorities and my commitment to myself. And it really helped with my acting. It helped me stay focused and not get overwhelmed by the demands that an acting profession can do to someone in New York City. It really pulls you in a lot of directions. And so I wanted to teach yoga. I wanted to become a yoga teacher. And I found a sweet yoga therapy training program with Genevieve Yellen. She is, oh my goodness, I love that woman so much. This was in Austin, Texas, with Sundara Yoga Therapy. And I did my 200-hour training with her. And I knew that this was the path that I wanted to take. I loved Bikram yoga. I loved the exercise component of that. But I really wanted something more. I wanted something deeper that yoga therapy was able to provide for me. So I became a yoga teacher. And then my husband and I moved to San Francisco. And after I had my first mammogram, I was told that I had breast cancer. So I had stage 2 breast cancer. And luckily, I'm in remission now. But yoga, once again, helped me through that. There's a sweet little center in the San Francisco Bay Area called the Cancer Support Community. And they had yoga therapy there. I met my next mentor, Cheryl Fenner Brown, And she was the yoga therapist at the cancer support community. And I studied under her, and she helped me decide to continue my yoga therapy education with the 500-hour training through Niroga Yoga Therapy in Oakland, California.
That's so cool. I did not know that part about your cancer diagnosis and the cancer support community, and that introduction there. It's interesting because cancer support communities are nationwide in the US, and we have a chapter here locally in Durango, and I offer the yoga component of that for the folks in my community here, and it's been an amazing partnership as well. So it would be great to even give a little shout out to the listeners who may be experiencing cancer themselves, to check in to see if they have a local cancer support community, or for the yoga therapists listening to see if they can get involved with their local chapter providing yoga. They've been really receptive and recognize yoga as such an important modality for people going through cancer. So I love that background, Natalie. It's so great to kind of get a glimpse into you and what brought you here. And I know you started on that path of yoga therapy study with Niroga, and then eventually you finished with us. And now you're a certified yoga therapist who specializes in end-of-life care. And so I'm curious, did you know that would be your specialty when you embarked upon the path to be a yoga therapist, and really kind of what brought you in that direction, or what brought you to where you are now?
Oh, Michelle, it was the furthest thing from my mind to offer yoga at end of life. I thought I was going to use my yoga therapy certification to help actors like me find their voice, find serenity in this profession. And I do that a little bit. I do help actors locally using yogic tools. But I'm telling you, the Inner Peace Yoga Therapy program, that totally changed my path. It really blew my mind, Michelle. You have a great thing going there. So this happened during the pandemic. And I think the pandemic really put death for a lot of us in the spotlight. We were confronting death. We were confronting our fears of death, the fears of death of loved ones. And so it was front of mind when I took your training. At the same time, my mother was dying, and I was able to spend a lot of time with her. I was doing yoga therapy with her at the end of her life without really knowing that that's what I was doing. I just was being present. I was listening to her. I was helping her move her body in very gentle ways. We would do breath practice together and visualizations, meditations. But then up came the bedside yoga module with Molly Lannon Kenny, who I completely fell in love with. I mean, she is.
And she's such a pioneer in this
She
work.
truly
I really
is.
want to give a shout out to her.
I am so grateful to her and to you, because this is not something that you see a lot. You know, people, when they think about how they can use their yoga training to help special populations, they don't automatically think of people at the end of life. But what Molly really brought home was that is such a beautiful population to serve. They are just as deserving of feeling good, of feeling comfortable, of feeling safe as any other population. And so she really turned me on to that. At the same time I took that training, I also took Antonio Sausis's Yoga for Grief Relief module. And so the two combined happened right after my mother died. And so it was like, okay, universe, I hear you. I feel like this is the path that you want me to be on, and I will do it. And so one of the requirements, or one of the requests that Molly had for her training, was that we take bedside yoga approaches to either a local hospice or a home where we can serve people at the end of life. And I knew of this place in San Antonio. It's called Abode Contemplative Care for the Dying. And a friend of mine was a real proponent of it. She really loved to talk about it and support it. And so she got me in touch with the CEO, Mary Thorsby. The two of us immediately hit it off, and I started providing a lot of the tools that Molly gave us for bedside yoga to the guests at Abode, people who were at the end of life, as well as staff members and volunteers who worked in death care. And that's a huge part of it too. I think a lot of times we think about obviously the person who's dying or the person who's close to the person who's dying, a family member or a friend. And we sometimes forget about the people who work in death care, the hospice workers, the volunteers. You can imagine that they see death on a daily basis. They're working with people who are in deep grief and bereavement, as well as people who are contemplating their own death. And they have to carry that with them from case to case, day by day. And so at Abode, we really saw a great opportunity to provide yoga to people who do that for a living. And it's really taken off, Michelle. I'm just so grateful once again to you and Molly for putting me on this path that I never thought I would take.
I'm so happy to know this and to see that in you, right? See how this came about for you. And maybe you can even share with our listeners a little bit. So you started volunteering at Abode while you were in the practicum, the bedside yoga with Molly in our program. And then it really sprang into the work that you do there now. And I'd love to kind of have you talk us through how that took place and, what is end of life care yoga, right? You mentioned a little bit like what you did with your mom, but maybe you can also offer some more tangible things that you offer as an end of life yoga therapist with the people who are dying and the staff, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So I mentioned Mary Thorsby, the CEO of Abode. She and I hit it off right away. She's a big city gal like I am, and we like to get things done and embark upon projects. And so she has always been a yoga enthusiast. And so when I offered this to her and Abode, she was really excited. And so, like you said, we started on a volunteer basis where I would offer people bedside yoga. I would come to Abode every Friday afternoon and work with the guests. There's this wonderful story. One of our guests, his name was Ernest, and he looked forward to Friday yoga every week. He would ask the caregivers, we call them navigators at Abode, is it yoga day yet? Is it yoga day yet? And we all just fell in love with him. And so I would come into his room. Each guest has their private room at Abode. And quite a few volunteers and staff members would join me. And we would circle around Ernest, do some gentle joint freeing exercises. So I found that for people who are bedside, who are in bed and maybe aren't as mobile as other clients we might have as yoga therapists, the joint freeing series works really well. And we calibrate it to where they are. We meet the client where they are. And for Ernest, he was in bed, he was lying on his back, but he could move his wrists. I could gently put my hand underneath his knee and help move his leg, just to give him a little bit more comfort as he was lying there in his hospital bed. And meanwhile, the other staff members and volunteers would gather around, and a lot of it is the energy that we bring to the person at end of life. And so we would start with an intention. We would set our sankalpa for the practice, and then we would do a little visualization, kind of a centering practice. And that I could really see would be a wonderful way for especially the staff and volunteers to kind of leave their day at the threshold, at the door, and just be present with Ernest so that he could get their full attention and love. Then we would do some gentle breath practices. I really love bees breath. And the humming is a very accessible way to do breath practices with people at end of life. We're not asking them to do complicated pranayamas, but just a gentle humming is really effective, and it can really help ease their anxiety. A lot of people exhibit anxiety at the end of life, as you can imagine. And so humming really helped activate that vagal toning and get them to be relaxed and at ease. And then we would do some gentle joint freeing practices. I would bring in a bag of scarves and give every person a scarf, and we would play with the scarves, just let that help with mobility, moving arms. It would really help with shoulder mobility and ease of pain in upper back region and neck. And then we would do some energy practices. So just sharing breath, sharing presence with each other. We, like I said, we would gather around Ernest in a circle and inhale in his energy and exhale out our energy towards him. And it was absolutely beautiful. Just something that was kind of a spontaneous way of being with him. And then we would end with a guided meditation, usually a body scan, so that Ernest could systematically relax parts of his body and visualize parts of his body. And usually by the end of the practice, he would have a big smile on his face and be ready for a nap. The volunteers and staff members would be really rejuvenated as well and very connected to the work that they were doing and connected to each other.
Right. That's so beautiful. And it really does give me a nice picture, a really good sense of what it is we're talking about when we think about yoga therapy and end of life care. So the director, the CEO at Abode, must have really seen you in action and already being a proponent of yoga. I'm guessing, was like, we want more of this here.
Yes, yes. She tells a wonderful story where, she has a very active yoga life. So she takes yoga classes daily. And then she has her life as a CEO at Abode. And at one point, she thought that those were two separate identities. And I think bringing yoga to Abode allowed her to see, wait a second, it's all one. When we think about end of life, we think about being present. When we serve the people at bedside, the people who are at end of life, we need to have our full energy and be completely and totally present with them. And yoga is about that. It's about the breath. The first thing that you take when you are born is a breath, and the last thing you take when you die is a breath. And so the breath really unites us, both in our yoga practice and in our life from birth to death. And then, and she always jokes, the last pose that most yoga classes have is Shavasana, which is corpse pose. And so we insert a little bit of the gallows humor there, but it really aligns well with end of life care. When you think about those three components of presence, breath, and then that final pose at the end of class. And so, yes, she saw that there was a real unity between the two. And I told her a lot about Molly and you and what I learned during our training. And she was like, wow, we need to have something like that here. She really thinks of this as kind of the new frontier, both in death care and in yoga therapy. And so we launched our very first Abode End of Life Yoga certification this past summer. And Michelle, it was so sweet. It was really wonderful. The nice thing about our program is that we have classroom time where we learn concepts of yoga therapy as it relates to end of life care. I really use the Panchamaya Kosha as a model for stages of dying, so that we can meet our clients where they are along the stages of dying and view them through those 5 lenses of the Panchamaya Kosha. So where are they physically? What can we do physically with them? Where are they energetically? What kinds of practices can support their energy at this stage of their dying process? How are their emotions? How are their mental thoughts? And what's on their mind right now? What's important to them? What are their core beliefs? What are their faith foundations? And how can we meet them there? And then finally, what brings them joy? What brings them joy? And how can we insert more joy into this dying process for them and for ourselves as well? And so we did a lot of that in the classroom, but then we asked our students to come over to Abode and apply some of their teachings to our guests at Abode, much like I did when I started on this path.
So let me just clarify, you're training yoga teachers in this method.
I am.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Oh my gosh. So are you drawing people mostly from your area or really kind of outside your region too?
We started with just the area. So we had a couple yoga teachers and also people who weren't yoga teachers, but just were curious. They loved yoga in one way or another, and they were really curious about how they could apply yoga to end of life care. As I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but when we think of yoga, right, we have to do a lot of education on how yoga is much more than just physical postures and tight yoga pants, that it is truly a philosophy, it's a way of life. And so I think a lot of our students were really curious about how the yoga that they knew in the studio could be applied to people who were in hospital beds at the end of life. And so a lot of the education was around that. We also inserted certain elements of death doula education. And so talking about how to help people with advance directives, get their affairs in order, where to find forms such as this document called the Five Wishes, which allow people to write out their final wishes for their family members and their MPOA, their medical power of attorney, helping people with legacy projects. Are there any last projects people want to do before they die? Photo albums, letters to loved ones, musical tributes. We also talked a lot about bedside manner and how to be truly present and coming in with that don't know mindset when you approach and work with people at the end of life. We use some wonderful books. The Five Invitations by Frank Ostaseski is one of our favorites, and it truly embraces that don't know mind and really trying not to be an expert. We don't need experts at the end of life. We just need love and compassionate care. And so we use a lot of his teachings, as well as Joan Halifax has a great book called Being with Dying. And she talks a lot about how to just be there without an agenda, without necessarily a hard and fast goal, but to just be. And so sometimes that takes a lot of education to get people out of that fix-it mindset and more into that contemplative mindset.
Yeah. Oh, that's also really good. I love that you're doing all of that, Natalie. And it feels like you're the perfect person for it. And I say that in a way that what I'm trying to convey is, yes, it is so much of the energy that we bring to the work that we do too. That is that third element, if you will. It's the yoga practices and philosophies, and it's the person that you're meeting, but then there's also your own presence that creates this additional element where the healing, whatever that looks like, healing, of course, doesn't mean curing, can take place. And I just see you so well suited for this.
Thank you. I mean, it's taken me a lot of years and a lot of work on myself so that I can be truly present for others.
I get that. I get that. So I guess, you've spoken quite a bit about it. If we were to say really broadly, what is your vision for ideal end of life care? So, I mean, all of us will encounter this ourselves. We have aging parents. And if, now that you have so much knowledge and work in this area, what do you kind of wish for everyone in terms of end of life care?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michelle. I think it starts with contemplating our own fears of death, because a lot of times that's what stops the conversation from happening. And we sometimes are in denial about death. And I think the yogic texts really help us to really look at death as this is going to happen to us. And none of us get out of here alive, so might as well embrace that and do the things that you want to do now. So I think it starts with that. Make sure you tell people that you love them. Make sure that you forgive people. You ask people for forgiveness. So starting with that and letting people be more comfortable with that fact. And then really my dream would be that we have yogi doulas in every hospice, in every nursing home, in every personal care home, end of life home, like abode, where we really can be present and do very gentle movements if it makes sense. But we have trained yogis who can read the room, who can offer yoga to people at end of life and people who are grieving, and then people who work in death care. So I would love to see more yogi doulas to accompany the big death doula movement that we see taking over America right now. I feel like we're hearing a lot about death doulas and death cafes. I would like yogi doulas to be part of that conversation as well.
Yeah, I can see so much synergy and value there. So I guess last question, how do you keep yourself steady and present for this work? Oftentimes there's suffering, as you mentioned, and you must have your own work and daily practices that keep you steady. You've already kind of alluded to that. So can you give us a glimpse into what that might look like?
Yes. We teach this to all of our yogi doula students and our doula students, and it's something that I do for myself. I kind of learned this by being an actor and how I needed to make myself fully present for my time on stage. And I was like, this would also be good for everyday life and the work that I do in death care. I call it opening the shop and closing the shop. And so opening the shop is kind of a ritual that I've put together. It's more like a recipe where I have a centering practice, a breath practice, a movement practice, and an affirmation. It could be at my Sankalpa, or it could be a bigger affirmation as well. And that could be if I only have 2 minutes in the car before I'm walking in to work with my client, I'll do it there. Or I can take a full hour or something every morning. And so I really like that as a way to kind of leave my stuff at the door, create this boundary with yogic practices, and then be able to enter into the world that I'm serving with a clear mind and an open heart. And then the same thing, I don't necessarily need to take this work home with me. These are not my stories to tell. People's death processes and their grief processes are not mine to carry or hold. And so if I'm fully present with them while I'm serving them, I also want to be able to let it go. And so closing the shop is kind of those same yogic practices that were in opening the shop, but in reverse. So I might start with my affirmation and just remind myself, okay, this is who I am. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm about. And then I'll do some gentle movement, maybe brushing myself off or giving myself a high five. I think I learned that maybe from Molly, of just kind of having that ritual to signify the end of the work and honor the work. Then I'll do some breath practices, maybe some gentle humming to kind of cool down and relax my nervous system, and then come back to myself and my centering. And so I try and do that every day, just as a general practice, but especially before I work with people at the end of life. And I find that it's really effective for me to be fully present with them, but also to take care of myself in the process.
That's so important, and it's so beautiful to hear how you've applied this. And, I think that more that we can see that our lives are not separate, our yoga practice isn't separate, our work isn't separate, and yet we can kind of look holistically at our lives through the lens of yoga to really kind of give ourselves the best approach to the day as we can. And that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. And may I promote our trainings coming up?
Yes. Yeah. And I'd love to hear about your podcast too. So feel free to share stuff with our listeners, and I can provide links in the show notes too.
Oh, fabulous. Well, we have 2 trainings for end-of-life yoga certification next year, 2025. We actually have a virtual training that's going to happen over Zoom, and that will be March 8th to April 6th. It will be Saturday and Sunday afternoons for 5 consecutive weekends. And each module, we kind of tackle a different kosha. And the end, we focus more on grief and how yoga can help with people who are undergoing bereavement or grief. And then our in-person training will be in late summer, and that will be in San Antonio, Texas, at a beautiful studio called Pure Prana Path, which is just immersed in nature. And I feel like nature is so important for yoga and for people at end of life, having that access to nature. And that will be 5 consecutive weekends again, Saturday and Sunday afternoons from July 26th to August 24th. And we started a podcast at Abode. It's called Before You Go, the official podcast of Abode Contemplative Care for the Dying. I am a co-host with our CEO, Mary Thorsby, and we talk about death. We approach different subjects in death. We talk about people who are caregivers. We talk about some of our guest stories and things we've learned as we've served people at the end of life. And it's really fun. Mary and I, it's not as depressing as one might think a podcast about death would be. We try to insert some humility and some lightheartedness because, as we talked about, Michelle, it is something that we will all experience. And so might as well embrace it and really start to understand it. And we hope to do that with our podcast.
That's so great, Natalie. I'm so happy that you're doing all of this work out there. I think it's really awesome and wonderful. And thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This was so thrilling, Michelle, and I just love speaking with you.
If you'd like to learn more about who we are and what we do, visit us at innerpeaceyogatherapy.com.